Every town has a dark side. All throughout history, and in basically every culture around the world, you'll find stories about creatures with eyes so black they're like staring into the abyss. If you're one of the unlucky ones that find yourself making eye contact with them, they invoke a feeling of immense dread, and there's good reason for that. It's because these beings are actually taking away part of your soul. Hey guys, it's Andrew, and thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Everytown, where today we're talking about something no human truly understands, yet we all have heard stories about them in one form or another, and each and every one of them is terrifying. They revolve around creatures or entities with jet black eyes that appear in the middle of the night looking to take something from you. Depending on who you ask, these things have been called demons or vampires, and some say evil spirits and even aliens. And today, in our culture, we call them the black-eyed children. These very specific and creepy stories of the black-eyed kids have been making the rounds for years across the US, and in some cases, they go beyond our borders as well, though they all remain typically in the Anglo-Saxon countries. It's designated as an urban legend, but there really might be something more to it, which we'll get into later. These stories are usually always happening in remote places and at night, and to give you a clearer idea of what it is we're getting into today, we'll picture this. You're driving on a deserted stretch of road. Maybe you're leaving a friend's house who lives in a rural area, or you're headed up to a vacation spot somewhere in the woods. You pull off to get some gas, but because it's past 10 p.m., no one's around. The little convenience store is closed, and all that's available is the gas pump. You fill her up, put the cap back on, and just as you're about to get back in the driver's seat, you see a couple of figures walking towards you. As they get closer, it becomes clear that it's just a couple of kids. And they ask that you take them somewhere, that they're in dire need of a ride, and yet they are completely calm. You look around, expecting grown-ups to be nearby, possibly to ambush, but you don't see anyone. And they're just kids, so your guard isn't fully up. You're not worried about them attacking, but you're also a true crime fan, so you're a little weary. You might even consider helping them, and that is until you get a good look at their eyes. And they're completely black, like infinite darkness. No pupils or iris, just plain blackness, like empty bowls reflecting a little bit of that eerie fluorescent light above. Your stomach drops because this is not normal. It's not even human. A deep fear creeps in and you're unsure how to react. The worst part is, and they already sense your fear. You quickly get in your car to drive off and you manage to get away. Only, is it possible they took a little piece of you with them without you even noticing? That's just one scenario that could play out, but this story has many variations as multiple people have reported their creepy encounters with these beady-eyed young people. These kids usually show up in two ways. First, they're out and about, like at roadside diners, deserted streets, or in the woods, waiting to approach people. They ask for a ride, if the person has a car, and if that individual obliges, the children stay quiet during the drive until they reach their destination. Once there, they hop out of the car and disappear into the night. The other way they pop up is an even more frightening and intrusive manner, by knocking on somebody's front door to ask if they can come in. They'll often say that they need to make a phone call to their parents or just want a glass of water. "You have to let me in," or "Please, I need to call someone," are common phrases that come out of their mouths. And people who claim to have encountered them often say they're usually wearing old-fashioned clothes, almost like something from another time. It's either that or just plain dark hoodies, which are used to conceal their faces. Apart from the kids showing up alone in the dead of night, which is scary in and of itself, is that beyond just that, there's an indescribable vibe they give off, according to witnesses, who say they feel uncomfortable, awful, almost ill. The longer they stay with these kids, well, the worse it gets. It's as if the children get into their heads and take control. Look all across the internet, and you'll find countless tales about the black-eyed kids. And so, where did all these stories actually come from? Well, the first time people reported seeing the black-eyed kids was back in 1996. Brian Bethel, a reporter from Abilene, Texas, was in a movie theater parking lot one night trying to read under the marquee lights when two kids came up to him. And he thought they were just asking for money. And at first, everything seemed normal. He rolled down his car window to give them some change, but then he suddenly felt really scared, though he didn't know why. When he lowered the window, the kids who were wearing hoodies asked him for a ride home because they wanted to see a movie and had left their money there. Bethel was shocked when he looked into their eyes and saw they were completely black, no pupils or anything. One of the kids noticed how scared the man was and tried to calm him down, but it just made him even more afraid. And it always bothered Brian, wondering how they knew he was feeling so anxious when he knew he wasn't showing it outwardly. As a reporter, he had found himself in some sticky situations before, talking with unsavory people, so he knew how to not let on what he was feeling in order to be able to talk to them and get the information he needed. Bethel felt like their intuition went beyond what you would consider normal, but they were messing with his mind, and so, after a moment, he just rolled up his car window and drove off. And then, when he checked his rearview mirror, the kids were completely gone. By then, Brian was a well-known journalist in the area. When his readers discovered the story he had published about his encounter, they didn't doubt there was some truth to it. But they knew he wouldn't risk his reputation for nonsense. And so people from all around then chimed in, not only backing up what he said, but they also stepped forward to share their own anecdotes about the black-eyed kids, which they knew were real, but up until then had been scared to speak publicly about out of fear of ridicule. And from Brian's single sighting, the stories then began to spread. And now, websites that publish urban legends and creepypastas are filled with the experiences with the BEK, and many other people have recounted similar occurrences. In January of 2016, a woman in Kansas reported that during a snowstorm, some children knocked on her door. According to her, it was a boy and a girl who appeared to be around 8 years old, and they were not dressed properly for the cold. Feeling sorry for them, she allowed them into her house to warm up. Once inside, they asked to use the bathroom, and shortly after that, her husband's nose started to bleed. And this wasn't anything he was prone to, and it wasn't small. He was leaking pretty good. While she was assisting him, she turned around to find the kids standing there, staring at both of them intently. Then they said, "Our parents are here." They opened up the front door and left. The woman looked out the window and saw the kids in a car with two tall men dressed in suits driving away. In another instance, outside of Dallas, 37-year-old David Kessel and his girlfriend Megan headed up north to look after a large countryside house and grounds for some friends who went on vacation. The property was surrounded by forests, hills, and some caves, so it was in the middle of nowhere, really. The first few days were peaceful as the couple enjoyed the pool and taking care of the many animals on the ranch. One evening, after tending to the horses and putting the geese away in their pen, Megan noticed that the farm cats were acting strangely, snarling at one of the patio doors. Then the mares got scared and began kicking in their stalls. A cold wind blew in, and dark storm clouds covered the stars, and David headed for shelter in the guest house where they were staying before the rain began pouring down. Once inside, he heard a loud knock on the front door. Thinking it was Megan, he opened it, but standing there were two children around 12 and 14 years old. They were drenched by the rain. Then a third, taller and thinner teen joined them. All three were wearing dark hoodies and looking down to hide their faces. They asked if they could come in, explaining that they had gotten lost in the woods. David was apprehensive. Not only was this place out in the middle of nowhere, so how did they get there, but the electrical gates surrounding the buildings on the property had been closed. He stalled by talking with them as he looked for his girlfriend over their shoulders. That's when the tall boy looked up and locked eyes with David, which he described as being dark, bottomless pits. The boy then grinned, revealing his blackened teeth, and then all three began calling him by his name and taunting him, saying he was going to die alone. And David, terrified, shut the door and locked it. Moments later, Megan came banging on the window, so he let her in, and she said she didn't see anybody out there. The owners of the house, upon hearing the story once they returned, revealed to them that on previous occasions, the security cameras around the home had captured three ghostly figures moving across the lawn. They couldn't make them out entirely, but clearly there were three distinct entities. So, pretty terrifying stories and certainly unexplainable stuff here. When you dig in, you can find several encounters that are all pretty similar, yet distinctly freaky in their own way. Now, some people say all these tales are just made up, but others, especially those claiming to have had experiences, say they're absolutely true. What these children are exactly and what they want, though, nobody really knows for sure. As it turns out, while Bethel's story back in '96 seemed to open the floodgates for people to come forward with their experiences, well, his wasn't the first encounter. These kids have been around for a long, long time. An anonymous man tells of a story that his grandfather Tom had told him had occurred back in 1918 in Texas. In that year, it was an unusually hot summer that stretched on for months, which is why Tom had all the windows and doors open in his house to allow for some sort of air circulation. He was sitting on his back porch one evening reading a book when he heard some knocking on the front door. He thought it might be some guy asking for food or work, as his house was located next to the train tracks and those types of situations weren't uncommon. And Tom went into the hallway to answer the door, and to his surprise, he found two children, a boy and a girl, standing in the doorframe. And they asked if they could come in and take a rest, as the sweltering heat was overwhelming and their house was far away. Tom observed them carefully and noticed some strange things. Despite the intense heat, for one, the children weren't sweating or disheveled. They had dull skin and their clothes were perfectly clean as well, so it didn't appear they really needed a rest from anything. Kindly, he offered them a seat on the porch, but they insisted on wanting to come in because it would be cooler inside. The girl began to repeat incessantly then, "Can we come in? Can we come in?" Exasperated, Tom slapped her hand just to silence her, at which point she finally looked up at him in the eyes. And what he saw stuck with him for the rest of his life. The girl's eyes weren't eyes at all, but two completely black sockets, just dark, endless holes. Once again, the girl asked in a chilling voice, "Sir, can we come in?" Tom was so scared he just retreated back into his kitchen without responding. And there he sat for a long time, too afraid to even look around the corner, until the barking of his dog, who had approached trembling in fear, made him react. Then, when he finally looked out, the children were gone. With so many different stories from all around the country, well, there seems to always be four characteristics that they all have in common. For one, these creepy kids are never alone. They often show up in pairs, and often it's a boy and a girl. Sometimes there are more than one, but never has an encounter happen with just a solo child. Number two is that opposition to their requests makes them more insistent and even aggressive. It escalates to the point that people close the door or drive away, and only then do they disappear. Number three is they seem to know what you're thinking and manipulate you into feeling a sense of dread and fear. Of course, seeing black eyes will freak anyone out, but they always hide them at first, and this isn't because they don't want you to see them. It's because they want to save them for the ultimate reveal and effect. These kids, before showing their faces, give people a sense of dread, even though they're not really doing much, and as the emotion grows, that's when they strike and show you their eyes. Though the descriptions vary, as some witnesses say they are actually black eyes, and others say there are no eyes at all. Despite the fear they invoke, apparently they can be super convincing in trying to get people to let them into their homes or cars. Another weird thing is how they talk. They often speak in a flat, mechanical way, like they're following a script. Their facial expressions are odd as well. Often a blank, emotionless look makes it seem like they're not quite human. Which, of course, is a great question. If these things are real and aren't human, well, what exactly are they? People have suggested they could be vampires, demons, or spirits. Some think they're vampires because of their pale skin, because they usually show up at night, needing permission to come inside wherever they are, and they're really insistent about it. Others think they might be demons or some kind of evil spirit. Those who know about this sort of stuff often say that having completely black eyes is a sign of these kinds of beings. And they also say that after an encounter with them, there's often a strong smell like sulfur, which is linked to demons. And this smell is reported in encounters with the black-eyed children too, right after they leave. And some think they might be spirits because of how they seemingly come and go as they please in the blink of an eye. But there are also other ideas. They could be aliens, for example, specifically the kind that's often linked to this phenomena, the Greys. And Greys are well known for their big black eyes, with no pupils, iris, or white, just black, just like how the black-eyed children are described. They also have grayish skin that almost looks plastic. This matches up with the descriptions of the black-eyed children, who people often think look thin and sick because they're so pale. And what if instead of being Greys, they were a mix of them and humans? There are theories that suggest this, saying they'd have features of both, Greys and humans. And so the scariest thing about the black-eyed children, their eyes would come from the aliens along with the thinness and the pale skin, But at the same time, they have human features too, like hair and a normal-sized mouth. And stepping away from the paranormal and looking more into real-world possibilities, some skeptics suggest that all this could be some kind of cult or even just bored teenagers playing pranks. They say it could be kids dressed up, wearing black contact lenses they bought online with their parents' credit cards, going to a different neighborhood where they wouldn't be recognized, knocking on strangers' doors just to scare them. And those who disagree with this argue that it's pretty hard to believe that so many kids would decide to pull off such a weird prank. And really nowadays, what's the point of pulling off a prank if you don't film it for YouTube? And yet, there aren't any examples of it online. Also, going to different places at night in the middle of nowhere when most of these kids are between 8 and 14 just doesn't seem feasible. All we really know for sure when it comes to this urban legend is that the lack of verified information and physical evidence limits us from determining what any of it really is. Whether these black-eyed children are demons, vampires, hybrids, aliens, or just another urban legend, hearing about them is freaky, especially when you realize they don't fit neatly into any single category. Humans like to put labels on things. When we can't, it leaves us a little bit unnerved. Many cultures have described demonic creatures throughout history with black eyes or even no eyes at all. Native American legends talk about them, and Japanese myths mention similar beings. And these creatures were often seen as lurking in the woods or hills, bringing bad luck or death, and their eyes were always a big giveaway. It's been suggested that these creatures feed on souls and life energy. And in the present day, in our culture, we've named them the black-eyed children. Beyond the US, there's tales of them from France, the UK, Ireland, and Australia. So while all these stories may seem like they're made up for dramatic effect and attention, maybe there really is something more to it than we will ever understand. Across all of time and every culture, there have always been these creatures looking to be invited in. And so, if you ever come across a couple of kids along the road or knocking at your door, so check them out for sure. They might really be in need of help. But also remember these stories and check out their eyes. Because if you let them in, they may steal a piece of your soul. So that's it for this week's episode of Everytown, and thanks for tuning in today. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss out on the 3 new videos we're putting out each and every week. And please do come back next week for another episode filled with scary, strange, and mysterious stories, because you never know. Maybe your town will be next.